Welcome. I think this is our first 4 o'clock event. We were going to try it out against much protest, but I think it's a time we like. So expect some more 4 o'clock events. Before we start, I want to thank Susan Patron and the staff at the Center on National Security for putting this together. I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank a number of our funders are in the room. I want to thank them and tell them that we do these events with public funding. All of the public events. The rest of our funds are for dedicated research projects and publication projects. So thank you very much. Today's is one of a series of events we will have on what seems to have lost its name, but what we call the region, by which we mean the Middle East plus sometimes Israel and Iran, but the larger region with which the Center on National Security has dealt here and over the past 10 years at NYU. And so we've done a number of very small briefings on Iran. This is our first more public one. They're meant to be thoughtful, provocative, cutting-edge discussions, not sort of Iranian diplomacy 101. And I think you're going to find them rather interesting. We have a couple more like this scheduled throughout the semester, and you'll know about them. Among the other things we have going on in our larger Middle East series is an event on April 15th on Egypt with a number of people, all of whom you'll know, and I will send you, very well-known people actually, and I will send you updates on that as we have them. And the only other event I want to call your attention to today, because it fits in this context, is that on March 18th, we're having a day-long conference on 21st century warfare, the law, the enemy, and the battlefield. Because I think it's time that we really start to look at the fact that the face of war is not changing, but has changed. And so we will have a number of experts here talking about conventional warfare, some of the new simmering wars in Africa and what the challenges they pose, the targeted killing drone program, and cyber warfare. And it will be a rather intense day. The keynote speaker for the day is Jay Johnson, who was just until recently the general counsel for the Pentagon, who had to advise on many of these issues, and who knows as much about cyber as he does about terrorism. So he will be a rather interesting speaker, and this will be, I think, his first talk on the topic we've asked him to talk about. So I would invite you to come. Today, we were looking at diplomacy and the Iranian nuclear crisis. And I have to say that the nuclear issue is on the front pages today, and so I think it's timely to think about it from the perspective of Iran and perhaps the wider world. Bob Windrem is a fellow at the Center. He's been at the Center for many years. I don't know how many. He's one of my most cherished advisors. He's helped build programs, advise on research projects, etc. He is now investigative producer at NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams, but he has been in the journalism business for a lot of decades.
4 of them.
And somehow in that time he's found time to write a book. And that book was on, and I've mentioned it many times, on the nuclear issue. So there isn't really anybody I could have found that knows more about this topic than Bob Windrem. And so he will be doing moderating today. The conversation is with somebody who we feel very privileged to have here at the Center, and that is Ambassador Mousavian, who has a long history that includes Iran, Europe, the United States, the greater Middle East, and of course, the nuclear issue. And I'm going to read a little bit about his accomplishments. As you know from our handout and our send-out in the mail, he's currently at the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton. He was ambassador to Germany in the 90s. He was the head of Foreign Relations Committee of Iran's National Security Council in the late 90s until 2005. He was a spokesperson and a member of the Iranian nuclear negotiations team from 2003 to 2005, and he was the foreign policy advisor to the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council in Tehran during those same years. He has distinguished himself and come to our attention, my attention, and many of the people that I talk to on a daily and weekly basis because of his writing. He writes frequently, and he writes with a greater understanding of Tehran and where it fits into a changing world than just about anybody. And so sometimes provocative, but always worth reading. I point you to trying to find him and Google him and read what he says, because whatever goes on here today, we won't get the full flavor of it. So, Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you. We're going to have a few moments for questions at the end. And so,
good afternoon, and thank you for, excuse me, thank you very much for attending. And thank the Ambassador as well for gracing us with his presence. The first question is, I read recently where you had complimented President Obama on the choice of John Kerry as Secretary of State and Chuck Hagel as Secretary of Defense. What is it about those selections that gives you some level of hope for better relations between the two countries?
First of all, I would like to thank you, Bob, and thank you all for participating in this event. When Obama came to office in 2009, right, there was a great amount of optimism in Tehran. Tehran believed in his good intention. The question for Tehran was whether he would be able to deliver or not. The engagement. Unfortunately, after 4 years, engagement failed, and Obama administration had the harshest sanction, covert actions, orchestrating international pressures against Iran. Maybe the most hostile actions against Iran happened during President Obama. Still, I believe Tehran does not doubt completely the good intention of Obama.
Well, what is it about Kerry and Hagel that gives you hope?
Exactly, Bob. Here I want to come to a point. The first 4 years, in my understanding, Obama could not deliver his engagement policy and his good intention. Because first of all, he had problems within his own administration, in White House, in NSC, even in the State Department. Second, he was confronted with Congress. And third was pressures from AIPAC, from Netanyahu, you know all. But in the second term, at least having John Kerry and Chuck Hagel on board, I believe he would have a united position within his own administration. In first term, his administration was disputed. Whether he would be able to convince the Congress, Netanyahu, Israeli administration, I don't know yet. But at least I believe these three people, Obama, John Kerry, and Chuck Hagel, they are sincere for a real diplomacy.
Let me ask you this about John Kerry. We're advised to both speak up, by the way. I received a note. We're too soft-spoken, apparently. John Kerry has had a very aggressive role in U.S. foreign policy towards Iran. I'm told, for example, that there may have been back-channel negotiations that John Kerry was actually part of over the last several years. Is that part of the reason why you see Kerry as someone who is going to put Iran right near the top of his foreign policy agenda?
I really don't know whether John Kerry has been involved in back channels. But everyone knows he was against the Bush policy on Iraq. Iranian crisis is not very different. Therefore, there is a precedent in his school of thought that he is against war and he is more for diplomacy.
And what is it about Hegel specifically? Is there any position, is there anything that Hegel has written, anything that Hegel has said that you look at and you tell your colleagues back in Tehran, this is an opportunity for us?
Hegel's position, I think, has been clear. He also has been very powerfully defending diplomacy, direct negotiation, improving relations with the US, and he has been opposing unilateral sanctions, the legislation passed by the Congress. And he believes the unilateral sanctions are counterproductive. We don't have so many congressmen to think like that.
Do you think, or how much do you think, their positions on Iran played into President Obama's selection of them? Do you think that their positions elevates Iran within the president's mind, within the White House?
I don't believe Iran has been the only issue for Obama to appoint Kerry and John Hagel. John Kerry is very well known in foreign policy of the United States for decades. And he had very key position as the head of Foreign Relations Committee of Senate. Maybe he is between 10 top foreign policy within even Republicans. I don't believe Iran is the only issue, but for Obama to follow the engagement policy with Iran and to go for two-state solution on Israeli-Palestinian crisis, maybe these two figures, they are more compatible to his policies.
When you talk to your colleagues in Tehran, and I assume you still have colleagues that you speak to on a regular basis within the foreign ministry and within the national security establishment, have you advised them that this is an opportunity?
Well, I wrote 2-3 pieces. Definitely I have advised my friends, but even I wrote publicly that the triangle of Obama, Chuck Hagel, and John Kerry is a good opportunity for Iran to bring the diplomacy on nuclear and even beyond nuclear, Iran-US relations to a success after 3 decades of failure.
Looking at Joe Biden's comments, that would seem to even push this idea further, that there is within the White House a realization that this has to be dealt with, or at least that a resolution should be sought first before any other cards are placed on the table. How did you respond to Biden's public comments on this?
I think Joe Biden's comments is not new. We have heard a lot of such comments.
But at the beginning of the second administration.
Yeah, but the problem is not with the statements. I mean, Iranian problem is not with the good statements. Iranians, they evaluate the intention of U.S. administration by actions, not talks, not statements. During Obama's first period, we had very nice statements. They made very clear statements that they are ready for direct negotiation with Tehran, with no precondition, with no threat. But in practice, everything was 180% different.
But early on, that was not necessarily the case. I mean, if you look at, without going further into Biden, I mean, there were 2 letters written by President Obama in April and May of 2009, within weeks after he began his administration, offering, one could say, a hand to the Supreme Leader, written personally to the Supreme Leader, without preconditions, and that the response was not positive from the Supreme Leader, that there was a discussion on his end of
How do you know it was not
preconditions.
positive?
Well, that is what I am told. but I'm told that there were preconditions, and the comments out of the White House back then were the president was looking forward, whereas the supreme leader was looking backward, and that he was looking at the relations and a number of conditions that he would have liked to have seen dealt with before they sat down. And then, tell me what happened. Well, tell me what happened from your perspective.
First of all, it was Iranian side who congratulated Obama as elected president.
Without a response.
Without a response.
But that was also Ahmadinejad.
Anyhow, Ahmadinejad was Iranian president.
Right.
Who, for the first time, congratulated an elected U.S. president. This was completely unprecedented.
In early...
In the history of Iran-U.S. relation after revolution. But the U.S. president did not respond. Ahmadinejad wrote the second letter to President Obama. This was again Iranian initiative to approach Obama. Obama again did not respond. You are right, Obama wrote the first letter to Ayatollah Khamenei. Ayatollah Khamenei also, despite the fact Tehran was very much disappointed about not responding to Ahmadinejad's letter. Nevertheless, Iranian leader respected Obama and wrote the letter to Obama. Obama's message to Ayatollah Khamenei was his readiness for bilateral talks, for improving the relations. The core issue was this. Iranian Supreme Leader also responded to him positively, exactly the same. He didn't have conditions. He said he is looking for a normal relation with the US based on mutual respect and non-interference, which is normal. If the Iranian leader's response was not positive, definitely Obama would not have written the second letter. Therefore, the first letter should have been enough encouraging for Obama to go forward. The second letter arrived just a short time before election 2009.
May.
And informed Iranian Supreme Leader instructed his administration to prepare a positive response. But it was just during election. Right after election, the US administration sided itself with Green Movement. And Iranian Supreme Leader then said if they have a goodwill, good intention for a normal relation, then why they are supporting the oppositions?
Well, in terms of support, I mean, there will be those who will tell you that the U.S. essentially stood on the sidelines, that it could have done a lot more in support of the Green Movement that it didn't, and that it had deliberately done that in order to preserve the opening of early 2009.
Yeah, but still letters are different with actions. Even after Obama's second letter, Ayatollah Khamenei publicly told Obama in a very important speech, I think it was in Mashhad, he said, "We are waiting for your positive actions. We don't see any change in your behavior toward you."
And what were those positive actions that he saw?
I mean, first of all, he's telling the US president that you are following exactly the policy of President Bush in hostilities, escalating the sanctions. I mean, the most sanctions ever we have had during President Obama. Obama himself in New York, you remember, said, I have been able to orchestrate international consensus, UN security sanctions, unilateral sanctions. You read New York Times that the first day or first month in his office, he instructed for escalating the covert actions. You know how many Iranian scientists they were assassinated.
Well, but there's no one suggesting that the U.S. played a role in the assassination of the scientists. Even Tehran is not saying that directly. I mean, Tehran is saying Israel.
No, Iranian intelligence minister very publicly said we have evidences. Israeli intelligence service, the U.S. intelligence service, and British intelligence service, they have had joint cooperation for covert actions, cyber war, assassinations.
But the assassinations, of course, are a bit separate from cyber and other issues. I mean, the assassinations are something that I have not seen.
Still, Bob, cyber war is a kind of war.
Right.
I mean, a president who is looking for engagement should not give in his first months in his office. He should not instruct his administration to go to escalate covert war against the country.
But why would he then secretly, privately, send letters to the supreme leader at that point? If he was pushing an agenda that was covert actions.
Exactly, this is what Tehran is telling Washington. They say, we are hearing nice word from you, but very nasty actions.
But why would the president do that, is my question.
I
Why
don't know.
Right.
I don't know. You are American, but you should tell me.
But you are also involved. You are a diplomat. You understand far better than I the words
If
of
you
diplomacy.
ask me, I have the same question from the previous administrations. I mean, I remember in 1989, when I was the head of Europe in Iranian Foreign Ministry, we received a lot of messages from Bush father administration to President Rafsanjani proposing a goodwill for goodwill. You remember that time we had Western hostages in Lebanon, American hostages, French hostages, British hostages, French hostages, German hostages, many hostages. We received tens of messages from US administration at the highest level. Goodwill begets goodwill. You show goodwill to facilitate the freedom, the release of Western hostages. We would show a goodwill. Rafsanjani trusted President Bush, and he really used all his potential in Lebanon. And ultimately, all Western hostages, they were freed.
Except for those who have been killed.
Yeah, it was before. It was before. But after the freedom of all hostages, not only the US reciprocated Iran with goodwill, but increased the pressures and sanctions. If you ask me why, I really don't understand. During President Khatami, you remember the September 11 attack here in New York? You remember war on terror declared by the US? And the Americans, they approached Tehran to cooperate with the United States in Afghanistan on war on terror. It was official invitation made by Clinton. I was that time the head of foreign policy.
This is after
No,
9/11.
no. That time, it was in 2001. I was the head of Foreign Relations Committee of National Security Council. This was a big discussion in Tehran whether we can trust Americans or not, because of the history of Iranian goodwill, which they received. They did not receive any goodwill in reciprocation. Ultimately, Tehran decided to go to cooperate with the US on war on terror. And very soon, due to Iranian cooperation in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda was removed, Taliban was removed.
Herat, right? And I've had General Eikenberry tell me that Iran was very helpful.
Right, exactly after US victory in Afghanistan, because it was done because of Iranian support. When the case was finished in December, and Iran cooperated in Bonn conference to bring Karzai administration right 3 weeks after Bonn conference. In January 2002, President Bush had a statement calling Iran axis of evil. I mean, we really don't understand when Iran stretches hand, shows overtures, such a huge overtures. Afghanistan was not a small issue.
No, and certainly
and the
there were
US
cooperation.
immediately shows hostility in response.
Now, when the U.S. has increased sanctions, when, as you've said, that there have been difficulties in reciprocating on both sides, and yet you have some hope now that in the second term, things are going to change. What is the basis of that hope? If you have now seen a record of increased sanctions, if you have a record over multiple administrations where, in your words, they have not reciprocated Iran's open hand, what gives you hope now that it's going to get better when, in fact, the nuclear issue now seems to be accelerating again?
First of all, the big issue is nuclear, right?
For now, yes.
One of the reasons I am optimistic is Iranian readiness to make a big deal on nuclear. Iran is ready. I hope, this is my hope, Obama with John Kerry and Chuck Hagel, they would be also ready to go for a big deal on nuclear to resolve the case.
Now, what does a big deal entail?
The P5, the world powers, plus Germany, P5 plus 1, which they are negotiating with Iran, they have 5 major demands in all negotiations they have had with Tehran in 2012. They have 5 major demands. The first one is they are asking Iran to implement additional protocol to give the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Organization, more possibility for more intrusive inspections.
Parchin among them.
Parchin is one of them.
This is, for those who don't know, it's a suspected nuclear explosive site.
We don't have anything beyond additional protocol on transparency measures on nuclear issue. If a country is committed to additional protocol, it means that country is committed to the maximum level of transparency which internationally exists. This is the first demand they have. The second demand is another arrangement, they call it subsidiary arrangement code 3.1. This is again about more transparency. With these 2 arrangements, if Iran complies, then the IAEA would be able to resolve all technical ambiguities.
Well, let me just look at that. Parchin is the big issue among the first point. I mean, Parchin is a place that the United States intelligence and French intelligence and British intelligence suspect was used for testing explosive components of a nuclear weapon. There was an agreement by Iran to permit those inspections, I believe it was last April. Those inspections have not yet happened. There have been discussions about the modalities, quote unquote, of that inspection. But here we are now in February, and there has been a number of organizations that have reported using satellite photos that the area has been, quote, cleaned up, that buildings have been turned down, that bulldozers have been used to remove the debris. And the suspicion is that Iran does not want a real inspection. Iran does not really want transparency.
On Parchin, Bob, we had the same situation in 2004, 2005. The same allegations, exactly the same. But because that time we were implementing additional protocol, we permitted the IAEA to visit Parchin. And after the visit, the Parchin was clean. they understood everything, all allegations, they were false.
But they obviously have new information.
Okay.
That is at least their claim, that they have new information, that they need to go back, and that is a critical component of the inspection.
First of all, Bob, you know, if there is nuclear tests anywhere, even if you remove the whole building.
Well, but these are explosive tests, the
okay.
components of the
Doesn't
testing
make
needs, right?
If it relates to nuclear activities.
Well, these are not nuclear activities. These are testing of weapons, components that would be non-nuclear but explosive in
For what?
terms of
explosive, you have on conventional arms, you have many explosive tests. On every conventional arms, everywhere. Explosion, I mean, is not the reason.
But why has it
If
taken 8 months, or excuse me, 10 months now, for an agreement to actually be finalized?
I tell you why. The third demand, Bob, is for Iran to cooperate with the IAEA on quote-unquote possible military dimension issues,
Which relates to Portugal, right?
For Iran to cooperate on possible military dimension issues, Iran should give access even to the IAEA beyond additional protocol.
But if
I
you're
mean, there
looking-
is no arrangement beyond additional protocol. But let me tell you the fourth and the fifth, Bob, to give you the right picture. The fourth demand of the P5 is for Iran to cap its enrichment at 5%, stop 20%. And the last demand is on limited stockpile enriched uranium. The first three relates to transparency, like Archie. The last two relates to breakout capability. As long as Iran has limited stockpile, as long as Iran is enriching below 5%, there is no danger for breakout. This is the 5 demands. Iranians, they have 2 demands. Recognition of Iranian rights for enrichment under non-proliferation treaty, like other members of NPT, and lifting the sanctions, even gradually. Iran is ready. The big deal you ask me, the big deal is if the P5 and Iran, they can agree to put all 5 demands of world powers and 2 demands of Iranian in one package and define different steps, I mean, to be implemented step by step with proportionate reciprocations. Iran is ready for this deal. Iran is ready to implement additional protocol, subsidiary arrangement code 3.1, to give access for Parchin, to go even beyond additional protocol to address possible military dimensions. But Iran is asking for a package.
Now, let me ask, I was recently told, like within the last 24 hours, that Iran is installing a new assembly of more advanced centrifuges, the IR2Ms, without getting into that level of detail, and that this assembly of 3,000 new centrifuges is 5 times more efficient, 5 times more productive than previous, and that these are at Natanz, and that gives people a great deal of anxiety, of concern, and also admittedly some surprise that this is not an Iran who wants to slow down, but this is an Iran who wants to accelerate. Whether that's for negotiating position or not.
No, I'm not surprised at all, because the logic of the world powers for sanctioning Iran, they believe if they sanction, if they put pressures, Iran would slow down the nuclear program. This was the logic of the sanctions. Iran is going to show the world powers you are wrong. If you increase the sanctions, we would increase the level of enrichment, the capacity. This would go together. as much as you increase the sanctions, we would increase the enrichment capacity.
But that is
This is the message.
right. But that is also very dangerous if you have an adversary in Israel who is saying once you get to 240 or 250 kilograms of 20% enriched uranium, which they see as the breakout goal line essentially, and that number is going to be reached July or August. Then there is
on
crunch
Israel's
time.
bomb. First of all, if you look at the history from 1991, at least 16 times they have introduced dates which Iran would have nuclear bomb. 1991, I have the list.
By the way, I have it in my book too.
You have it in your book.
I don't have
In
the list.
1991, they said Iran would have nuclear bomb by 1995. Therefore, we should attack Iran. In 1995, they said Iran would have by 1999. We should attack. They have continued like this. I mean, therefore, this is the story of Israelis. You remember in last September, Netanyahu said by April 2013, Iran would. Now they say by 2015 or.
Depending on who you're talking
Yeah, it depends, you're right. This is, therefore we cannot rely on what Israelis say.
Are you saying that basically it's
by
fake?
estimate of Israelis, Iran should have nuclear bomb in 1995. And now we are in 2013.
So the Israeli deadline.
No, the
doesn't-
Israelis, they have very clear policy. It's very well known to me. They are always claiming Iran's bomb in order to organize more pressure, sanctions against Iran. This is the story. The nuclear bomb is just a good instrument for Israelis to push the US, Europe for more sanctions and pressures. And they have been successful up to now, to be very frank. But whether they have been successful to manage the nuclear crisis, no. In 2005, 2006, when we left the job on nuclear, and the new administration came and they started enrichment. Sanctions.
The new Ahmadinejad
Yes.
administration.
The P5, the US decided to refer Iranian nuclear file to United Nations Security Council, you remember. They decided to start sanctions against Iran. Now, it's 6 years. Let's review together the result. They have had 6 resolutions mounting sanctions against Iran. This is completely, historically unprecedented, such a level of sanctions.
Multilateral.
Multilateral, and even unilateral. I mean, Europeans, they have never had such a policy, even to go beyond the US.
But why do they feel that way? I mean, if it is unprecedented, then perhaps they had a
First of all,
justification.
Bob, let's go to our evaluation about the resolution of Iranian nuclear file through sanctions and pressure, whether this would get to anywhere or not. When the P5 they started sanctions in 2006, Iran had about 1,500 centrifuges. Now Iran has over 10,000 centrifuges.
So it didn't work.
That time Iran had a very, very few legal stockpile of enriched uranium, below 100. Now they have 7,000 kilograms.
Of which approximately 150 to 200 are highly enriched.
It is not highly. I mean, this
Well,
is,
it's 20%.
you know, Bob, this is another mistake, unfortunately, in the media. 20% by the IAEA, I mean, international.
But it's at 19.75%.
19.75.
So it's not
You're
quite
right.
right.
They consider 19.75% low enrichment. It's not high. To have nuclear bomb, you need to go beyond 90%.
You need to go, but the real grunt work of getting enrichment is from the natural state to 20 and then from 20 to 90. It's a
Here
lot
we are
easier.
not going to hide anything. If Iran decided to make nuclear bomb today, they would be able to make it. No doubt about it. They have developed, that time we had IR2, the first generation of centrifuges. Now you are talking about the new generation of
And
centrifuges.
in much greater numbers.
Much greater numbers.
Instead of having 20.
That time we had
3,000.
3%, our enrichment was at the level of 3.5, now it's 20%. Or
19.75.
19.75. That time Iran was not building the fuel rods, they didn't have technology capability, now they are building the fuel rods.
But
Therefore, here the P5, they have been able to escalate, to impose sanctions against Iran. But at the same time, for the same reason, Iran has expanded its nuclear capability. I believe this was not the objective of sanctions.
that may be, obviously not. But Iran has now had 30 years of economic stagnation, to be kind. And that Iran, in the last several years, since the sanctions began, has lost, what, since 2006, the output has dropped by 1 million barrels a day, and right now Iran is producing less than 2 million barrels a day. The state of North Dakota, which wasn't producing anything a few years ago, is now producing 500,000 barrels a day. The price of oil is dropping as a result of US, Canadian, and to a lesser degree Mexican production. That the estimates are that the floor of oil per barrel a day in 5 years will be 70. It will never get to beyond 90. And the world, if not awash in oil, is faced with a situation where those who have oil are going to be involved in price cutting, and that Iran, even if sanctions were dropped today, would be facing an economic problem, the latest in a series of economic problems that is going to keep it perhaps more than just stagnated. And I know what you're going to respond, because I've heard you say this before, which is, we went through the Iran-Iraq war for 8 years, this is nothing. But there is a cumulative effect.
No, I don't say this is nothing. This is huge effect.
Right,
No,
but-
no doubt about
Right,
it.
but it is not the level, but
No,
you survived.
But what is the objective? Tell me. If the objective is Iranian nuclear program, I tell you the end state. Even if Iran does not export 1 drop of oil, they would not change their nuclear policy.
I've heard you say that before. Now,
I bet you this would be the case, because as long as Iran is member of NPT, Iran does not want to be discriminated as member of NPT. Iran wants to enjoy its legitimate rights under NPT. It has nothing to do with the bomb.
right, that sounds like, I believe, let me pose this. Is it rational for Iran to withstand all these sanctions, to withstand all the world's approbation, to withstand isolation, increasing isolation, and a possible future of dissent for nuclear power, which would permit them, what, 2% of their power
If
needs?
you are talking about nuclear, I will tell you no, it doesn't work, definitely. But the nuclear issue today for Iranian is not nuclear, is defending their integrity, independence, identity against the pressure of the West.
And it also,
It is not the nuclear issue. Don't make a mistake.
but it defies logic for Iran to sustain so much, to be independent, to have nuclear power. It would seem logical, at least from people who I talk to, that you're trying desperately to hang on to a weapons program, because the weapons program at the end of the day is worth all of that.
For Iranians, nuclear weapon, definitely they don't want.
But you also said 3
Nuclear
minutes ago that
weapon.
they could build one today if they
No,
wanted to.
they can make,
Right.
but they don't want to make.
On the other hand,
Remember, Bob, during Iraq's invasion of Iran, they used weapons of mass destruction against Iranians, chemical weapons. 100,000 Iranians, they were killed or injured. Unfortunately,
by the chemical weapons alone.
by chemical weapons. Unfortunately, technology and material was provided by the US and Europe for Saddam Hussein.
It's in my book.
And I mean, the P5 today, they are negotiating with Iran on quote-unquote weapons of mass destruction. They consider Iran as the threat for international peace and security because of its nuclear program, while Iran does not have single nuclear bomb, and they themselves own over 20,000 nuclear bombs. Their nuclear bombs is not threat to peace, security, and Iran, which doesn't have one nuclear bomb, is the biggest threat to international peace and security.
Do you believe?
I mean, it is not, it is, for Iranians, really, this is a joke.
Do you believe
And they know this is not a nuclear issue. But, Bob, I was talking about the 8 years war. Despite the fact Saddam Hussein used weapons of mass destruction, Iran did not reciprocate it with chemical weapons because the late supreme religious leader believed use of weapons of mass destruction from Islamic point of view is haram, is forbidden. I mean, my argument is this. If during a war your enemy is using weapons of mass destruction, killing, injuring 100,000 people, and Iran did not respond just because of its religious beliefs, I think this is the best evidence, the most credible evidence that they don't own nuclear bomb.
Do you think that the Western world's presumption that if you get a bomb, the world becomes more dangerous, do you think that that is based on an anti-Islamic bias? That another Islamic bomb, that an Islamic country with a bomb
This is understanding in Muslim streets, in Arab streets, in Iranian streets.
But what about you?
I also believe there is a clear double standard, no doubt about it, Bob. You heard last night the new test of North Korea.
Interrupted my dinner.
I'm really sorry. But look, North Korea withdrew from NPT, tested nuclear bomb. Iran is member of NPT and does not have nuclear bomb, and has given more than 4,000 man-day inspection to the IAEA. But the level of sanctions against Iran is more than North Korea.
And it's broader.
Then what do you, as Iranian, what can be your conclusion? We are member of NPT, we don't have nuclear bomb, we are open to IAEA, every day they are there. North Korea withdrew, tested the nuclear bomb, but they have imposed sanctions against Iran more than North Korea.
That may change.
Therefore, this cannot be the nuclear bomb issue. The other example, there was pressures on India and Pakistan
In 98, right? Subsequent to their
before
tests.
they test the nuclear bomb. Right after they tested the nuclear bomb, the US and the Western countries, they established strategic relation with India and Pakistan after they tested nuclear bomb. What message is this for Iran?
And for
For the others.
and for Islam in general?
I mean, when you have a strategic relation with those countries which are not member of NPT, and they have tested nuclear bomb, and they have hundreds of nuclear bombs, and you establish a strategic relation, and you put all pressures on a country which doesn't have nuclear bomb.
Well, then that though, for some
Therefore, what
reason-
is the conclusion? What can be the conclusion?
Well, one of those countries is Islamic.
It doesn't matter. I mean, the double standard
You
is
think,
very
you
important.
think the double standard is against Iran? Do you think it's against the broader
No,
Islam?
totally the double. If Shah were alive, definitely Iran would have nuclear weapons.
Yes,
No doubt.
no doubt. I totally agree
And
with
the
that.
US would have continued its strategic relation with Iran, despite the nuclear weapon by the Shah.
I do not dispute that. But let me ask you this about some of your experience back when you were the negotiator. Did you feel that you had access to all the technical knowledge,
No.
the technical
No.
details? And were you surprised at times when you would read in the New York Times or read in the Washington Post or see hopefully on NBC News that there was some development that that could be taken as
Look,
weapons
Bob,
development?
first of all, although I was personally invited as member of nuclear negotiation team, spokesman of nuclear team to visit our enrichment site, Natanz, uranium conversion in Isfahan, I never had any interest to go to see these sites.
But you just said that you did not, that there were times when you did not have.
I would tell you more. I mean,
Right.
We really, as a diplomat, not only we didn't have technical information, we don't understand technicalities at all. This is not about Iran. If you read George Perkovich's nuclear book on India, he would tell you with documents, he would prove to you, even Indian Prime Minister didn't know about nuclear bomb activity of Indian Army. Even the Prime Minister didn't know. Today, do you think thousands of American diplomats, they know about the nuclear activities of the US? They don't know anything.
But they're not negotiators on nuclear issues.
Even the negotiators, they don't know.
You
When
were.
the chairman today
Right.
is negotiating, but I bet you she doesn't know about the total capacity, technicality of nuclear activities of United States.
Did it bother you?
No,
I mean, if you see a story in the New York Times about something, about Fordo, for example, because I'm told that you really didn't know a lot about Fordo until it became public. Did that bother you? Did that upset you? Did that cause you to
Definitely.
make a phone call?
No, definitely it upset me because I see this is another reason for more tensions, you know. But when we were negotiating, regardless of the details of technical activities, which this was not really our business, the major demand of EU3, that time it was not P5+1, you remember. It was Germany, UK, France. They came to us. And we were diplomats, we were not nuclear scientists.
But you had nuclear scientists on your team, or those who were
No,
educated.
no, only one member we had from Nuclear Atomic Energy Organization, but he was not really negotiating, he was just presenting.
It was your technical expert.
Yeah, yes, sir.
So you had a technical expert.
They told us if you implement additional protocol, if you implement subsidiary arrangement code 3.1, and for a short period, if you give access beyond additional protocol to visit your military sites, and as a confidence building measures, if you suspend for a short period the enrichment, then we would make the deal. Everything is perfect, we would resolve the problem, we would normalize the file at the IAEA, and everything would be resolved. We decided to implement additional protocol. We implemented subsidiary arrangement code 3.1. We gave them access beyond additional protocol. They went to our military sites. We suspended enrichment for 1.5 years. We did everything, every major demand they had. But at the end, they promised from the beginning that they would recognize the Iranian rights under NPT, like other members of NPT. There would be no discrimination. But at the end, after 1.5 years of suspension, They came to us and they said, because of US objection, that time the US position was no single centrifuge in Tehran, zero enrichment. And they asked us to go for indefinite suspension. Nobody knew this indefinite is for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. That's why the Iranian nuclear policy changed. It was not because of Ahmadinejad.
Well, why did the U.S. decide they want that? Was it because that the U.S. had developed intelligence around that time, as has been reported, that there was a military component to the program? Why did they not trust you?
But you should,
is it pure prejudice,
no,
or what is it?
You should help me to understand the U.S.
That's not possible.
I really do not understand the U.S. Look, everyone should know here it was the U.S. who laid the foundation of nuclear Iran. It was not Islamic Republic of Iran. It was United States of America.
In the 60s.
In 60s. The first nuclear site was built by America in 1967.
The Tehran research
It
reactor.
was the United States of America proposed Iran to have 23 nuclear power plants. And
Built by U.S. companies.
directive signed by Gerald Ford said Iran needs nuclear power plants because of population, many reasons in the directive why Iran needs nuclear power plants. You would see in the directive many explanations.
Well, Iran needed nuclear power plants because GE and Westinghouse needed markets too.
Okay. Iran was entitled
I'm
to
helping
have,
you understand the United States better.
Iran would be entitled to have enrichment, reprocessing. They knew perfectly the Shah is after nuclear bomb. It was no secret because in 1974 the CIA wrote to the US president that by 1985 Iran would have nuclear bomb. It was clear. Revolution happened in 1979. The revolutionaries, they decided to stop all nuclear ambitious projects. They didn't want to have 23 nuclear power plants. They didn't want to have enrichment. They didn't want to have nuclear bomb. They stopped everything. The only thing they had to continue was the Tehran research reactor, because it was just a research reactor producing isotopes for patients struggling with cancer. It was completely a medical. And second was the Bushehr power plant, signed by Germans. They got 8 billion Deutsche Mark. 90% was finished before the revolution. Iran had to finish the other 10% because Iran had paid the money. That's it. Right in this period, when Iran decided not to have nuclear bomb, no 23 power plants, nothing, the US said, no, you cannot have even nuclear power plant. And told Germans you cannot complete the nuclear power plant.
And what you're...
I mean,
right.
I really don't understand. The nuclear power plant, if you are a member of NPT and you cannot have one nuclear power plant, then forget NPT.
Let me just move a little beyond that, and because I do want to give people an opportunity to ask questions directly. Don't want to monopolize. If there is open relations between the United States and Iran, let's assume that the triumvirate or quartet of Obama, Biden, Hagel, and Kerry meet an open hand in Tehran, and everything moves forward. It's not just the nuclear issue that separates the two countries. And there are, there's been discussion of the grand bargain. And the grand bargain may have taken different shades and may have taken different forms over the last decades. But what does that grand bargain look like to you? And does Iran have any leverage in this? As Syria falls...
Iran has a very big leverage because the major security threat for Iran is the United States of America. neither is Israel, nor Saudi Arabia, nor Turkey. Iran doesn't care about the other countries. Iran is surrounded by US military everywhere.
Every country that has a border with Iran has a
The
U.S.
Persian
military
Gulf
friend.
is US Army. Bahrain, US Army. Saudi Arabia, US Army. Afghanistan, US Army.
Iraq,
Turkey, NATO. Iraq, US. Iran is encircled.
Pakistan.
Pakistan.
I just want to help.
Therefore, Iranians, they understand very well. They have one major security threat to deal with, and that's the United States of America. If there is a grand bargain, if Iran has no more worried about its security, I mean the major security threat, then the nuclear issue would be resolved immediately. Because even that time Iran would not care about, not nuclear bomb, even Iran would not care that much about the capability. Today Iran is firm to keep the capability, not to go to nuclear bomb, but to keep the capability.
Which, by the way, is I don't want to get back into nuclear, but in some cases that's the equivalent too. But keep going.
No, equivalent, as long as, for this deal with Shataki, Iran is ready to go below 5%. Therefore, there will be no danger for nuclear bomb if the deal is made.
But let's go back to the grand bargain. So we've done so much on nuclear.
Then Iran and the US, they would be able to cooperate for security, peace, and stability in Afghanistan. The US is going to leave Afghanistan. The day US was going to invade Afghanistan, they needed very urgently Iran to cooperate.
And they
Today, they are going to leave Afghanistan. Again, they need Iran for safe exit of US forces and for maintaining peace and security in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is in a mess. And this would not be resolved unless Iran, Pakistan, and the United States, they can cooperate trilaterally to resolve Afghanistan. Therefore, the two pillars, Iran and the US, they would be able to cooperate. US has good relation with Pakistan, Iran has good relation with Pakistan, we can manage it then. The second big problem, international crisis, is Iraq. Then the door would become open for Iran and the US to cooperate on Afghanistan.
And on Iraq.
Iraq, sorry. Fortunately, this is unique. Despite of all hostilities between Iran and the US, the government in Kabul, Karzai, has a good relation with Iran and good relation with Washington. The government in Baghdad, Maliki, has good relation with the US and good relation with Tehran. It's really interesting. Therefore, we need to resolve hostilities between Tehran and Washington.
And Pakistan, too.
And Pakistan too.
You could say the same thing.
Then, nuclear issue would be resolved. It is number one for the US. For the US, number two, perhaps is Afghanistan. This, we would have big leverage for both of them. Number three for the US and Iran is Iraq. And then is security, stability in the Persian Gulf. Because Persian Gulf is providing 40% of world's energy. Now.
8% of U.S.
8%. And Iran as regional power, and the US as a world power, they have very important influence and role in Persian Gulf. As long as there is no cooperation between these two powers, we cannot think about the stable situation in Persian Gulf. This would open the door to create a regional cooperation system within the Persian Gulf. All GCC countries, Saudi Arabia, all Arab countries around Persian Gulf, plus Iran, plus Iraq. They would be able to establish a regional cooperation with a normal relation with the US, with the West, with China, with Russia. This would secure security in Persian Gulf. And I believe this would have huge impact on the peace process.
Because the peace process now becomes the fourth part
Yeah.
of the grand bargain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the peace process may be the most difficult part.
It is not because of Iran, this is because of Netanyahu.
Well, some Netanyahu would say it's
If
because of
Netanyahu
Hezbollah.
has cooperated with Obama in early 2009 on two-state solution, today this would have been solved. This was not Iran. I mean, unfortunately, Netanyahu is not cooperating with the
But
US.
Iran does have influence over
Definitely.
Hezbollah.
Oh, definitely.
Right.
No one can deny the Iran's influence on not only Hezbollah, Hamas, Jihad Islami, the Palestinian groups. Therefore, if there is a normal relation, here is another dilemma. This is another mistake Israelis they are making for many years. They are pushing the US toward more hostility with Iran. The result is more hostility between Iran and Israel and more problem for Israel in the region. But if Iran has normal relation with the US, then they would modify their position there.
In this grand bargain, it would appear that Iran has less and less options at hand. That it is increasingly operating from a position of weakness. And this is the last question I'm asking. In the economic situation, Syria's collapse, what you're seeing in the body politic in Tehran, all manner of domestic issues, political, economic, etc., that at the end of the day, Iran, and again, 30 years of economic deprivation or stagnation, isn't Iran in a worsening
no,
position?
Bob, to be very frank, I mean, this is something the US administrations during 33 years, they always have said Iran is the most isolated country in the world. This is the normal statement you have always had. If really Iran is the weakest, the most isolated, why you are so frightened? The reason the US number one security issue is Iran, because Iran is powerful. And it's getting more powerful.
Because of the nuclear capability.
Oh no, it is not only the war between Israel and Hezbollah in 2006, it has nothing to do with nuclear. Iran's influence in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Arab streets. Today the most popular in Arab streets is Iran.
Because it is perceived to have stood up to
this
the
is the
United States.
influence of Iran. I mean, I believe the US understands very well that Iran is extremely influential and important. That's why they believe Iran is threat number one. If Iran was a weak country, so isolated, economically collapsed, the US didn't need to bother.
All right. Well, on that note, and how are we going to? The microphones will be passed around. Okay. And let me see. I will start right here in the front row, and then we'll get to as many as we can.
Sure. So, first, thank you both for doing this. Every country has hardliners. I mean, the U.S. has way too many, and Iran has them too. And I think that, a lot of the fear on both sides of military action or of the development of nuclear program is that these hardliners win out. And I'm sure, there may be at times that you have felt the same way about Iran. So the question is, I feel like, looking back in the history of the U.S., we've made plenty of mistakes and plenty of times when the hardliners have won out. We can look back a decade and look at Iraq. With Iran and with the nuclear crisis in particular, what are the biggest mistakes that you think that the country has made? Do you think that hiding Natanz and Fordo were mistakes that were, pushed by hardliners? Or do you, I know that there are good reasons that have been brought up for why they were hidden. But, what do you worry about with your
on nuclear issue, first of all, I believe Iran did not make a mistake on Fordo. Because Fordo, Iran decided to have the second enrichment site under the mountains when Israelis, they started to threaten Iran for military strike on nuclear facilities. Then the consequences was for Iran to have the safe nuclear facility out of reach of the Israelis. I mean, this is the production of Netanyahu in Iran, forget it. If Israel has not threatened Iran, they would not have gone for second nuclear enrichment facility under the mountains. But if you ask me if the mistake is on nuclear, I believe Iran made one mistake, and the US, the Western countries, the world powers, they also made one mistake. Iranian mistake was to believe, not everybody in Iran, but radicals. They believed threats for referring Iranian file to United Nations Security Council, imposing sanctions, is just a bluff. They had their justification, you know. They were telling us that you are frightened, you are a member of NPT, our facilities are open to IAEA, we don't have nuclear bomb. Why our file should go to United? Why we should be sanctioned? Therefore, they were thinking this is a bluff. We knew the nuclear issue is 100% political issue. And the day Iran starts enrichment, this would go to United Nations Security Council and Iran would be sanctioned. Just because this is political issue. This is not technical issue. The issue is not about Iranian nuclear bomb. One mistake the world powers they made. They believe Iran is afraid of referring the file to United Nations Security Council, and Iran is afraid of sanctions. That's why they would not start enrichment. When we were telling Europeans that regardless, I was telling them in spring 2005, very, very clearly, sincerely, I told them, regardless of who would be president, that time no one could imagine Ahmadinejad would be president. My belief, everybody's understanding was Rafsanjani would be president. I told them, regardless of who would be president, they would restart enrichment. They were telling me this is a bluff and Iran would not do it. This was one mistake they made and the same mistake Iranian.
Gentleman in the blue shirt. Right? Yep.
Ambassador, you mentioned that you have a list of 16 statements that Israel made predicting what the date.
Iranian nuclear bomb since 1991.
I've asked everyone who talked about these 16 statements if they could send me a copy. Nobody has.
Sure.
Could you send me a copy? You know where to reach me. I'll remind you tomorrow.
No, I had an article published.
With the send it.
I will send the article.
Send me
It's on your,
It's
on
published.
the website, right?
Yeah, it's in the
There's a
website.
link on his Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah, it is
And you have
published.
the 16 statements.
Yeah, I mean, this is not, I mean, even Columbia University had a paper they published from 1995, 1991, exactly. Each year, Israel has made the same statement.
So you'll send it.
Sure.
Great.
Let me just alternate here from each side of the room. We'll get to you.
Hi, how concerned are you about the growing cyber warfare going on between the United States and Iran, especially when it comes to critical infrastructure on both sides? And as a
I'm very
former
much worried.
diplomat, how do you
I'm
think
very
it needs
much
to be dealt
worried.
with?
I'm very much worried. This is a very good point you made. Fardu, I said this is production of Netanyahu threats. After the US or Israel or Europeans or all of them together, they started cyber war against Iran. Iran decided to establish a cyber army. And today, after 4 or 5 years, Iran has one of the most powerful cyber armies in the world. This is again production of the US wrong policy. Iran was not supposed to have cyber army with thousands of personnel. They say Iran is between 5 top now. I'm not expert, but this is what the Western countries, they say. That's why it worries me, because I know the potential of the US and the West, and I now understand the potential of Iranians. They are not very far from each other on cyber war. It is a kind of war.
Do you see this bigger than the nuclear issue almost, potentially down the road?
I don't know whether this is bigger, because this is part of the nuclear issue. This is part of the story.
Tomorrow, by the way, the President Obama and the White House will be making statements and revealing a whole list of things to improve U.S. Cyber defense, and also offensive capabilities will be implied in that. And you're going to see that there's going to be a rollout over the next 2 days. Gentlemen in the back of you.
Here?
Yes.
Mr. Ambassador, thanks for your comments. With Iraq about to implode, and with your ties, both positive and negative, the Shia relationship, what do you see Iran's possibility to assist the Middle East in getting oil on the water, if we can put it that way?
The whole Middle East.
Well, let's take one at a time, but Iraq is going to... Go ahead.
See, to bring the whole Middle East to a stable situation, we need cooperation between regional powers. Iran is not the only regional power. Turkey is a regional power. Egypt is a regional power. Saudi Arabia is a regional power. We need to bring a kind of cooperation between the regional powers and the world powers. If it happens, I will be optimistic about the future stable of Middle East. But I'm not really optimistic. I'm very much afraid the Middle East has the potential now to erupt from Syria. Sectarian war, civilian war from Syria can spill over to Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Lebanon, and bring the Middle East to unmanageable situation.
One last question. The most important person in the room, Karen, has limited me to one more, so we're ready.
One issue that nobody mentioned is Iran's willingness to have Israel the right to exist as a Jewish state. Part of the core issues, the way I see it, when I was in Iran, Israel was all over the place. It was before the revolution. They assisted the army. Again, everybody said Israel even was involved with the Iran nuclear plans in those days, because they didn't threaten at that point to have Israel disappear from the face of the earth. Is Iran willing to say that Israel has the right to exist? Of course, there will be two-state solution and a lot of things. That the borders have been decided at least 5 or 10 years ago, even before Netanyahu was in power. Israel existed as a Jewish state was never acknowledged. This is a 47 issue, not a 67.
I think this is not a problem of Israel with Iran. We have about 57 Muslim countries, which about 50 or over 50 of them, they do not recognize Israel. Why you single out Iran?
Because they threatened to blow up, and the leaders said that
No,
30 million Iranian would
my
pay the
friend, the
price.
strategic allies of the US, like Saudi Arabia, they do not recognize Israel. They are the most strategic allies of the US, red carpet in the West, but they do not recognize Israel.
But they didn't threaten to blow them up.
Well, there is also the reciprocal. There have been threats by Israel to blow up Iran. It's much broader than both, than that. I think.
See, if you look at the history from 2000 to 2005, you would not find any statement by any Iranian high-ranking official threatening the existence of Israel.
Then the election of,
But unfortunately, you would find even during 2000 to 2005, many threats from Israeli officials against Iran. I mean, Israelis, they are threatening Iran, Iranian also are threatening Israel.
All right,
But-
now talk about the Holocaust.
But Holocaust, I believe it was, first of all, a mistake by Ahmadinejad.
He makes mistakes.
Yeah, but
this gentleman is here because,
Okay.
who said Ahmadinejad is not making mistakes?
I'm joking.
No. No, I think even Ahmadinejad 2012 is very different with Ahmadinejad 2005. It's completely different man. But, and also I believe his statement on Holocaust was very much in favor of Israelis. They used a lot, you know. It was big help for Israelis to use it
The
internationally.
Holocaust is a big help.
No, the statement Iran made.
It's a statement, right.
Because you read Israeli papers, they said this is the gift of God Ahmadinejad gave us. This is Israeli papers. But neither Israel is existential threat for Iran, nor Iran is existential threat for Israel.
We shouldn't believe.
Believe me, this is just rhetoric.
I hope you're right.
Even Israel today has about 400 nuclear bombs. If they have 4,000 nuclear bombs, they would not be existential threat for Iran. Even if Iran has nuclear bomb, it would not be existential threat for Israel. The Israelis' objection for Iranian nuclear capability is not because of existential threat, it's because of supremacy of Israel. They want to maintain their supremacy in the region by nuclear weapon. And Iran is breaking this. This is their problem.
Karen?
Well, there's a reason. My only comment is this: diplomacy is not easy. It isn't, and it is the most necessary thing in the whole world. So please thank Windrem. Please thank Ambassador Mousavian.